Guess who else is helpless? The G20 or the Group of 20. They have the money, they have the clout, but they don't have a consensus. Earlier today, the G20 held a special summit on Afghanistan. 3 things were discussed. Number 1, humanitarian support to Afghanistan. Nearly 18 million Afghans need foreign assistance. What's the best way out to help them? The best way to help them, rather. Number 2, the fight against terrorism. Under the Taliban, terrorists are regrouping. The likes of ISIS Khorasan are plotting deadly attacks. But the Taliban has no counter-terror strategy. And number 3, freedom of movement and open borders. Hundreds of Afghans want to flee the country. Will the Taliban let them leave? Now, these 3 key issues were discussed by the G20. Why are these talks important? Because the G20 has something the Taliban desperately need, and that's money. The G20 make up 90% of the world's gross output, almost 80% of world trade, and 2/3 of the world population. That's a lot of representation, a lot of power. Unfortunately, that also means a lot of differences. This summit was hosted by the current G20 chair, which is Italy. But 2 key players were missing: China and Russia. They did not attend today's meeting. President Vladimir Putin and President Xi Jinping did not participate because they think the G20 is interfering. Now, most members are using financial assistance as leverage with the Taliban. They want to see actions from the Taliban, whether on women's rights or political reform or counter-terrorism. And India is among those countries. Prime Minister Narendra Modi participated in this special G20 session, and he spoke on 5 specific issues. Number 1 is the historic ties between India and Afghanistan. These relations go back many centuries. They continue even today. The Prime Minister talked about the 500 plus Indian projects in Afghanistan. They have created jobs for Afghan women and youth. The second point he highlighted is the need to continue humanitarian aid. Prime Minister Modi said that every Indian feels the pain of the Afghan people. He had a clear message for the global community: ensure immediate and unhindered access to humanitarian assistance. Number 3, tackling terrorism. And this is something that India has repeatedly talked about. Afghan territory must not be used for terrorism, regionally or globally. The Prime Minister called for a joint fight against the nexus of radicalization and drugs. Number 4, an inclusive government in Kabul. This means women and minorities in key government positions. That's the only way to preserve the gains of the last 20 years, to contain and defeat radicalization. And the 5th point he made was on a unified global response. No regional cliques, no exclusive groupings, a common global strategy for Afghanistan. Prime Minister Modi said that without such a strategy, it will be difficult to bring change in Afghanistan. Now, these are concrete proposals. The problem is, not everyone in G20 agrees. Take China and Russia, for example. They want sanctions to be lifted. They want Afghanistan's foreign reserves to be unfrozen. But these countries are in a minority, thankfully. Their opinion is unlikely to be popular at the G20. At least that's the indication. The Taliban's godfather, Pakistan, was not even invited to the meeting. Neither was Iran. Only Qatar made it to the G20 summit, and their relations with the Taliban seem wobbly. On Tuesday, a senior Qatari official said that recognizing the Taliban regime is not a priority at the moment. They're more focused on the humanitarian situation. In fact, most countries are. The European Union kicked off the G20 summit with a big pledge: a $1.2 billion aid package for Afghanistan. And just to be clear, this is humanitarian aid. This is not development aid. That money, development aid, continues to remain frozen. So how will these funds reach the Afghan people? Not through the Taliban. The funds will be used by international aid agencies working on the ground. Some of it will be given to Afghanistan's neighbors as well. The timing of this G20 meet is very important. Both the US and the EU are trying to get a measure of the Taliban. Earlier today, the delegations met in Doha. On one side, the Taliban's foreign minister, Amir Khan Muttaqi, and on the other, envoys from the US and the European Union. The Taliban had 2 demands from them: diplomatic recognition and financial assistance. Now, at the G20, they did not get either. They cannot touch the humanitarian aid, and they're not willing to reform for diplomatic recognition. Remember, Afghan schools reopened 24 days back, but there are no girl students. Only boys can attend school under the Taliban. So it's a delicate situation for the G20. How do you help Afghans without helping the Taliban? That's the question they're dealing with. Direct humanitarian aid is a temporary fix, but right now it's the only option. It's too early to lift sanctions, to unfreeze foreign assets. And it's definitely too early to discuss diplomatic recognition. WION is now available in your country. Download the app now and get all the news on the move.